Hi everyone. Welcome today. I'm glad you could join us. Today I'm with Dr. Nicole Gruel. And Nicole, I've spoken to Nicole before, and some of you will be familiar with her. Nicole is the author of The Power of Notes. She's also the author of a couple of other books, which I find the titles really interesting for what we're about to talk about, which is Women of the Wise Earth and Dancing with Dragons. And boy, Nicole, aren't we dancing with dragons right now?
Aren't we just? Goodness me, I hadn't even thought of it in as applicable for right now, but you're absolutely right. We as a collective are doing the dragon dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many things to call it, but that's a really good one, I thought, because I was looking on your website and I thought, wow, that's Dancing with Dragons is so true with what we're going on with right now with this pandemic. Yes. So today we're talking about surrendering to the new. And when people think of, when people, like personal development and spiritual development, people talk about the power of surrender, it actually sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, doesn't it? Because you've got power on the one hand and surrendering on the other. It just doesn't sound like it just doesn't go together, but actually it can. So we're talking about how when we stop struggling with all types of things, or at least slow it down a bit, how that releases and liberates energy that can go into other pursuits. And we're seeing that right now, aren't we, Nicole?
Absolutely. And you're so right on that, Sheryl, the paradox, part of when our greatest growth happens is when we can sit in the tension of a paradox, and we're absolutely doing that right now. As we let go, we co-create something new, or at least allow space for that to happen. And it's a really weird place to be. This is a weird experience we're having.
Oh, weird. That's an understatement, isn't it? And while we're going to laugh through this, because again, I guess that's one way of coping with things too. For many people, I mean, laughter is great. It's better than breaking down crying. Although I will admit, in the very beginning of this pandemic, when it started and everything shifted really quickly, and we suddenly found ourselves, not knowing what's going to come next. Suddenly, it was a huge thing in front of us, which it still is. I shed a couple of tears. I was really concerned about what was going on. What about you? How did it affect you?
Yeah, the moment it affected me was when I found out a long-time friend from way, way, way back. I mean, we met probably about 20 years ago when I was living over in Europe, and he's a Spanish guy. His name's Pepe. And Pepe used to, we studied together. And then when I went over to his home country to go check out a bit of the south of Spain, he took me around on a moped, and, we just had some amazing experiences together. And he was a really bright soul. I got a phone call from a mutual friend to say he'd suicided in the midst of all of this, just when it was starting to get pretty full on, before all of the big lockdowns, but when the numbers were just creeping up and all the charts were going up and everyone's freaking out going, what's going on? This is real. And of course, Spain, as we know, has been one of the early epicenters. And his spirit, he'd been depressed for some time, but his spirit felt that was a good time to go with everything that was going on. Clearly, it was too much. And that was the moment for me when my tears came. I just went, wow, in the midst of losing someone that, is beautiful, the gravity of this and all of the lives lost and all of the souls leaving this planet en masse. I mean, big numbers very quickly. And look, it's not to say that we don't have big numbers leaving the planet all the time in other ways as well. This, coronavirus has really taken the forefront of our attention, and we've lost track of a lot of other things that might be going on. There are still conflicts going on in some places. There are other diseases taking lives. Some of the other things that we might normally do to end one another's lives aren't probably happening because of the social behaviors that are shifting so fast. But absolutely, I think, the grieving process, it's so important to acknowledge the grief, to be with it, to say, yep, there it is. because there's a lot of sadness around, and grief comes in so many forms, you know, not only the lives being lost, whether it's people we know or people we have no idea about, and we're just concerned about these big numbers of people we've never met. And also loss, you know, loss of job, loss of regular routines, loss of our social circles, and all the little pieces in our life that we come to love, or at least get used to. Everything just has changed so quickly. And for some, a lot has changed, and for others, as we were talking about earlier, not too much has changed.
Yeah.
So that grief, and of course, I know a lot of people listening to this, your community and mine, many are empaths, right, Sheryl? Many will be living that life, and so the empaths, aren't they getting a go at the moment as well, because they're tapping into the collective cosmic grief of this moment, as well as the joy and all the other things as well. But there is definite grief, and it's good to acknowledge it.
And this is a universal experience that we're going through right now. You know, this is, you know, what we're watching is what we've seen in sci-fi movies. You know, up until now, now we're living it. We're living history. We're living in a time now where we're going to talk about, and I've spoken about this on my Astro updates on my channel, that we're going to, in the future, be talking about life before the pandemic and life after the pandemic, because it's not going to go back to the way it was, because we've got these shifting sands going on at the moment, you know, like where a large chunk of the population has now become still and being at home. Others who are in essential services, their energy has and what they're doing is escalated. So there's this shift in all sorts of things. People who've been put off from airlines, looking to go and work for supermarkets or to work in other places. So there's this great up and down change going on at the moment, and it's like we've just got the sand and it's just turning it over and just seeing where grains will drop in different places at different times. But through all that, you're right, there's a huge amount of grief and loss of the way things were. A lot of little deaths and a lot of big deaths, a lot of deaths of lives, but a lot of little deaths along the way of our lives, and the things that, you know, the things that we valued that are now about to reevaluate, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I love hearing your enthusiasm and sense of assurance that the shift will happen and is taking place. I guess I'm a little more skeptic in how ingrained human behaviors can be. You know, I would love it if this is a shift point and we collectively make better choices about how we're being on this planet, you know, as custodians, as fellow journeyers with our other fellow living beings, and as people who get the privilege to be on Mama Earth, right? I would love it if we just could make some better decisions from this reset point. And at the same time, having, you know, understanding a bit about human psychology, we are just we are so quick to get back into habituated patterns as well. And it's really going to take a lot of work in this period of time, in this suspended window, for individuals and collectives to, you touched on values, to really reevaluate, reassess their own values, and then start putting pieces actively into creating new modes and ways of being. And I feel that unless we start to do a bit of that, it could shift similarly. I don't think we'll get back to exactly where we were, particularly on the hygiene level. We have a heightened awareness about that now. But there are so many people who just want to go back to how it was, exactly how it was. You know, give me my life back right away. And then there are many others like you and I who are, wow, what a window, you know, this is the time, let's step forward and let's just make all this wonderful stuff happen that has been happening in pockets and bubbling around for so long, right? These little mushroom communities of permaculture communities and complementary therapies and all of these wonderful things, right? I don't know. I mean, I personally have no idea what it's going to look like, where we go. I have all kinds of visions of what I'd love it to look like and what we could create, but I don't know. And I want to have so much faith in the human spirit right now to, you know, to trust that it's going to go where we could be in a way that's so much more wholesome and just beautiful, you know, a more beautiful planet for everybody. And the critic in me, I guess that part of me also goes, well, and I'm not quite sure if we're going to get there. So we'll see.
Well, you've raised an interesting point, which leads into our topic, which is surrendering to the new, really, because inherited surrender is a level of trust. You can't do that without having a level of trust in something else coming along. And I just want to just tell a brief story. Back in the 90s, I was very ill for 10 years. And for a long time, I grappled with that illness, which led to a near-death experience like you've had as well. And I came to a point in that illness where I surrendered. I didn't give up hope. I surrendered I let go. I let go of the struggle because I couldn't change what was happening. I tried many different alternative therapies and all sorts of different things, and it just wasn't working for me. So I just surrendered, and I came, and I guess this is like a reflection, a micro reflection of the macro, what's going on right now. I came to a point where I had to come to terms with my own mortality. And this is what we're all going through right now, aren't we? We're facing the prospect of our own death. Now, most of us are quite confident that if we do the right things, we follow the rules, we social distance, all the sanitisation, etc., don't go out to this, you know, hang around the supermarket or anything like that, stay at home as much as possible, that we will get through it. And that actually seems to be happening. You know, 80% of the population gets this virus and they come out of it fine. Some people get sick, they don't even know that they've had it. Some people get sick, and unfortunately a small percentage of those die. That will happen with any sort of virus, any sort of serious illness that we get every year, like influenza. But we are still facing the possibility of our own mortality. And what I found was when I surrendered and let go and came to terms with that and decided, I actually said to a higher power, and I don't even know what that was, that I am okay with whatever you decide because I can't do this anymore. I'm handing my future over to you. And from that point on, my illness changed in a way that I didn't expect. So when we surrender to something, we're liberating that energy to miracles occurring, to unforeseen possibilities and potentials arising right in front of us that then we grab onto.
That's powerful. Sheryl, what a powerful example. And you're right, it's a individual macro example of what the collective is going through right now. And as you identified there, you made a choice to surrender at one point, and that's a choice that everyone is faced with right now. You know, you can surrender to the greater process if you want, but you don't have to as well. That's fine too, you know. And as you gave in your example, you were trying every which way to do whatever you want, and there was a struggle involved with that until it got to a point where it was like, okay, enough of that, something different please. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that moment of giving it up giving it over, of accepting, you know, there are things beyond me that I might never understand, that I just can't do anything about. And if there is some greater force, power, being, whatever label one wants to stick on that, and if you even believe in that or not, to even have the courage to let it go into that, over to that, is such a monumental moment. Because it's that sense of self, that I, that we're so used to controlling and organizing and keeping ourselves together, right? That's how we keep our shit together, is like, it's this sense of I. It's allowing that to just go, you know, you can still have your autonomy within it. We're still an individual being with our personality and our ways and all the rest in our life and our relationships. But when we get to that point with certain things like health, or this is a big health condition, isn't it? It's a health pandemic. So whether it's our health, again, we can take individual steps to make sure that we can be the best that we can be and to support the process. But ultimately, where it's going to go and what it leads to, and look, the blunt reality is we do all die. That just happens anyway, you know, now or later, and how much suffering is involved, the grey areas in between. But that's, I mean, how did that feel, Sheryl, when you just let it go?
Well, it was like I said, it was very liberating. I let go of the struggle, the stress, the anxiety, the worry, the concern. I just let it all go. And it was pretty amazing, actually. And I'm not saying that this is an amazing experience that we're going through with this pandemic. It's not at all. It's a shame that it's happened, and I feel very sad for so many reasons about it. But there are other things that, you know, it was just freeing, and I became lighter. I became more clear-headed. I gained clarity, because all of that stuff wasn't happening inside my mind. So I could make better decisions. That sort of thing. I just faced each day with a much better prospect and more hope. Even though I didn't really have a lot of hope at the time, but it just came into play. That's all I can tell you.
And I find that's such the beautiful thing about that moment of surrender, is with it comes total presence. You know, it's that dropping of the fear and anxiety of the what could be, right? What's coming in my future, and then the depression of the loss in terms of what has been and what's in the past there. And it's just such a supreme mechanism to be in this day, in this moment. This is today. This is this moment in this conversation with this person. And then once this is done, then I move on to the next piece, and on it flows, you know, in this constant emerging process. It's so powerful that, you know, they talk about the power of the now and be here now. And this is what they were referring to. It's the ability to do exactly that. And how beautiful that surrendering allows that to happen even more.
And it's certainly a day-to-day process for all of us now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I have, you know, none of us do. We don't know where this is going, really, and what it's all going to look like. And I'm finding more and more, you know, as I speak with my own community, it is. I'm just kind of going from day to day and checking in. It just feels really important at this moment in time to be as present as possible, and just to, you know, make the connection, make the authentic connection. And of course, you know, I always thought that's what I was doing beforehand, but it feels even more like that now. Right now, I know I don't have great words around that, but that's just what it feels like.
I haven't stopped talking to people since this has all happened. I will communicate via email and text and through Messenger, Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever it is. because we all have very busy lives, but I'm actually speaking to people on the phone now, because, and like this, through Zoom or Skype or whatever, checking in with friends, seeing them face to face. That's really important, to see them. It seems to be that way, and to hear their voice. And, I just wanted to say, with that surrendering, that process, I mean, we are all surrendering right now, whether we are aware of it or not. There's this great unshackling of humanity going on right now. Not for those people who are basically on the front lines in essential services, but for the rest of us who now are working from home, or who've lost jobs and lost their business, like I have, by the way, and have no income. But there's an unshackling from deadlines, from expectations, from having to do things, and just being in the moment, like you're saying, just being present right now. Wow. Kids are being released from work, people are being released from work, kids are being released from school, they're home with families, routines, schedules, all that is just fallen away for so many people.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you think about the nature of interactions that are taking place, I would assume for the most part, at least from what I've been hearing, talking to people, the kids are loving it. They love being, back home from school, seeing more of their parents, seeing more of their family. And, there's a lot of parents who are juggling a whole heap of things. And so at least the ones I'm talking to are pretty stressed about all of that. But there are less demands in terms of, the routines and the travel, etc. It's just, yeah. For me, what has been so strong with me through this is what is essential. And we're using that language collectively, aren't we? We're separating the non-essentials, the so-called non-essentials, from the so-called essentials. Who gets to define that and what those actually are is a whole other kind of conversation. But as people quieten and come together more and more, and again, there are people who are in really unfortunate situations right now where being in the family home is the worst thing to happen, and I fully want to acknowledge that school is a safe place for some kids, and in cases of domestic violence, it's they said, where is it in China, what they found now that they're, sailing through a bit better, that actually during that period where lockdown happened, the rates of domestic violence skyrocketed. And that's terrifying. We're in Australia and we already know it's a pretty dire picture. And so I dread to think what's going on, behind a lot of closed doors right now. I really dread to think about that. And yet it's part of the reality of what's taking place for a minority of people. So this is it, it's the time to reassess and reevaluate what we were talking about before, and come together and quieten and reshift all of those pieces. So yes, it's natural to grieve the loss of some of those. We're going to have those choices to surrender consciously or, unconsciously to the greater forces. And what next? I mean, what next, I think part of the key to what next is what happens when we are in the present. As we manage to keep ourselves in the moment, from there, I think what comes next. For any people who are in that practice of being very present, you'll know that, right? You just stay present, and the next thing always comes. It always comes, and sometimes it's a real surprise in terms of what that is. So, I think that's a marvelous practice right now, because currently the long-term planning, we can do it. We still have the capacity to do it, but with so many unknown factors, it's a lot less stable in planning the future. And we've just seen that, haven't we? 2020, what a cracker. We just had New Year's Eve. People have put their visions and intentions into place that this is the year. And at least in Australia, along come the bushfires. And then boom, bang on the back of that comes this. I spoke with somebody this morning who was in one of the areas affected by bushfires, and she said, there was a whole heap of people that lost their homes, so they all had to move to the caravan park. And now with Corona, all the caravan parks are shut. What happened to them? And it's like, you're absolutely right. Like, what? So much unknown right now. So, yeah, back to our part about just that surrender.
Yeah.
Again, the surrender. Wow.
Well, and in all of that, let's get on to the grief. Let's talk about that, because that's where a lot of people are at now in various stages. And I think it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, wasn't it, who sort of identified the 5 stages of grief. There's probably more. And we don't always go through them all at the same time, in the same way, and in a linear fashion. We'll go all over the place with it. So let's talk about some of that.
Absolutely. Well, again, as mentioned before, it's natural to be grieving right now. And there are many people who are unaware of their own emotions. Our modern society, at least up until now, has been very good at creating ways for us to suppress our own and deny our own emotions, and they're perfectly socially acceptable. We can drink ourselves into oblivion. There's all kind of recreational drugs. There's 24/7 entertainment. I mean, there's non-stop ways that we can detach from our own bodies and what our bodies are telling us, and these funny feelings within it and emotions, etc. So again, as things quiet down, if you're feeling, a hole in your belly, if you're feeling a heavy heart, if you're crying you don't even know why you're crying, but tears are coming. If you just feel so tired and flat and lifeless and like you just want to do nothing, these can be connected to feelings of grief and loss. So it's helpful to identify for ourselves if that's going on. For some people, there's zero grief about what's happening. There's celebration, but let's stick with the grief conversation for now. So one, to identify what's actually happening within ourselves. Have a daily check-in. Have a regular check-in with ourselves. Am I feeling something particular at the moment, and what might that be? Where might that be coming from? And again, especially for those empaths and people who feel in a big way, is that grief my own, and or is that grief part of the collective? Some of us are able to hold emotions bigger than just ourselves, and we tap into our loved ones and people that we might not have even met yet, but those around us, because we feel them. So what that leads into is, once we've acknowledged what's going on for ourselves, to take care of ourselves. Take care. Of course, we're all doing that on the level of health right now. So I hope everyone listening to this is taking good care of their immune systems, and you have your home as your sanctuary, where you can make it as good as you can for body, mind, and spirit, right? Because our health is not just our body. We can lift our immunities in so many different ways and boost them and strengthen them. So to really be taking care of ourselves physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually at this time, staying clean on all of those levels is so very helpful. And then if we can manage to stay clean and have the hygiene on those, to even start to boost those, strengthen those, and take them to the point where we feel very strong within ourselves. Because it's that wonderful, the very famous analogy of the gas mask on the plane, right? You're useless if you hand it out to everyone else, and you'll be passed out on the floor soon, right? So put it on, take care of you, do what you need to do to take care of you. So we acknowledge the grief, we take care of ourselves. And I also want to point out, in acknowledging the grief, it's okay to just be with the grief. There is a message right now that some have of, okay, so what's next? Or, what do you do in this time, or where do you go? For some, this is the appropriate moment to simply sit with the grief. And when we sit with our grief, and you'll know this from when you lose someone in your life that you love, there's that moment where you just need to be with it. And it can be uncomfortable. There can be a lot of feelings that come up around that. Um, and yet that is an essential part of the journey that needs to happen. Otherwise, if we don't allow that time and space for ourselves to just be with the grief and let it think, you can think of your grief as separate to you, if that helps, to let the grief do what it needs to do with you and through you through its own process. That point in time will eventually shift, but you will help it if you can be with it a little bit. You might even think of it like taking it as a very sad friend for a cup of coffee and sitting it down at the table and just being with it. And maybe you have nothing to say with each other but holding hands and crying, and that's okay too. Maybe you enjoy rituals, so you might want to create a space in your living area, even if it's as simple as a candle, or write a letter, put things there that give you a sense of peace and joy and calm that can aid you through a process, or flowers or something beautiful. But it's so healthy for our psyches to mark something powerful, especially like grief. And you said that before, Sheryl, too. Once we acknowledge that is there, it opens up space and energy for other things to move forward. So to do that for ourselves, right? And as we just sit with that, acknowledge that, honor the grief, then in time, space is going to be opened for whatever might come next. But I want people really to understand that you don't have to rush it. We live in a very strange culture where if we lose someone close to us, it's almost like there's this period of time where it's okay to grieve, like, okay, maybe a year. And then you're just meant to kind of get on with it. And it's like, what's that about? When you really tap into your heart, it's not bound by a timeline, this stuff. So be with it. And the more you simply be with it and acknowledge it, as uncomfortable as it might be sometimes, it will actually help you on the other side of that emerge even stronger and more grounded in your own being.
Yeah. And, right from the get-go with this, I saw classic signs of grief from my perspective. And because the stages of grief are denial and anger, bargaining, sadness and despair, and then you have acceptance. And right from the beginning, people were denying that something was going on. They were still going to the beach, still going out to the shop, still all it. Hello. Anyway, but that was the first sign for me to say, hey, this is what this is going to be. You watch the next step, And then there's been anger. We've had anger from people who, because their freedom's been taken away from them, and people suffer with that, and we're told to stay at home. And then we're looking on and see other people who won't cooperate. They won't stay at home. We get angry about that too, That's been really hard for me in some ways. I've seen that and I'm thinking, oh no, you're not coming from a place of community, you're coming from a place of selfishness, and I don't like that. None of us have, actually. So, and then we have the anger of, well, how the hell did this actually happen and who's to blame? There's that part too. So, and there's been a lot of people looking to blame. Who, how did this happen? Who should we blame? Let's point some fingers, all those sorts of things. And we've seen all this cultural offences towards other, offence towards other cultures who happen to be Asian. Yeah. I mean, that's terrible. It's what I've seen. So, so that was another stage of that grief too. And then we sort of go into the bargaining. Like if I do all the right things, everything's going to be okay. Things will go back to normal, so let's do that. But we've lost connections in a lot of ways with people. We've lost that connection that can cause us that sadness as well too, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think we're rekindling the connections too. So people are picking up the phone again. I mean, remember the telephone? Remember how we used to do that and have conversations? That's right. We're just, and people are simply keeping it real. Like, how are you? Are you okay? Do you have everything you need? Like, are you really okay?
Yeah.
It's great. You know, my partner and I, we for many years have been having this long distance relationship because that's, you know, we just live in different countries and sometimes we get to be together and sometimes we don't. But I had to have a laugh with a lot of this and think everyone's having a long distance relationship right now. This is what it's like. And when you have a long distance relationship, you actually have to learn to communicate with each other. Because yes, physical presence, nothing quite beats that. I mean, it's wonderful to just be in the presence of another and enjoy each other's company. But when you don't have that luxury, when you're limited, and thank goodness we even have the technology like this that we do these days, right? I mean, imagine if this was 50 years ago. Crazy how, oh goodness, what would it be, what would it look like then, or back when the Spanish flu happened? So right now we have this amazing ability to connect live time visually with one another, and we can still get a sense of how is that person doing, because I know you, you know me, and we know enough about each other to do that. So the connection is, I think, happening in different ways. People are deepening it, or at least I hope they're deepening it in some ways. I mean, there's a whole heap of folks who are just sitting on Netflix doing not much right now also, and checking out and tuning out and sitting in PJs and drinking all day long. I get it, you know, and maybe that's a stage in the grief process too, you know, or just also a symptom of a world and a life that is so busy and so full on that when you get the moment to just vegetate and do nothing, you embrace that as well. I mean, I don't think people should feel guilty for having that space and moment in time. Everyone's reacting quite differently to what's going on right now. But for many, we're learning to communicate and connect with each other. And we've seen those gorgeous examples in Italy of, you know, people singing over the balconies and playing music to each other. And this one's got a saxophone and that one's got a keyboard. And I have a friend in Italy, and I said, well, at least, you know, she was already in quarantine, self lockdown for 14 days when I'd spoken to her, when we were still walking around and doing things in Sydney. And I'm like, you know, thank goodness you're in Italy at least where that's going on. And she said, yeah, bless the Italians. That's just how they are, you know. So we're also drawing on our strengths culturally in how we do connect with each other and keep each other sane. Yeah. I mean, Australians like a sense of humour, and that's certainly coming through.
Haven't there been some funny memes on Facebook? Yes. I'm just roared with laughter at some of them. People are so clever under stress. And that's the beauty of the human race, is we are so resilient. We are innovative in times like this. We find ways to do things, and we're quick. We're quick in adapting. We underestimate, I think, this part of us, you know. Adaptation. I remember reading something about what Charles Darwin said, the evolutionist, and he said that it is not the intelligent or the strong that will survive a crisis or that will evolve. It's those who can adapt. And I think that's so true. The quicker we adapt to the situation and keep it moving and stop struggling with it and come to acceptance, which is really the final stage of that grief, the quicker and the easier it will be on us individually and collectively. It's coming to the point of knowing this is real. We have to deal with it, face up to it, stand up to it. And, you know, I'm really pleased to see people in my community standing up and doing this. And I was on a Zoom call this morning with just a check-in coffee chat, right? Anyone could join. And the lady who was facilitating it talked about faith keepers in the community. And it was a Native American concept that while everyone else is losing their heads, someone holds the fort, someone keeps the calm, the peace, the confidence, the faith going within that, and that's their role. And in shamanic practices, that's the fire keepers. So, you know, it's I think that's really important to have people standing up in those roles, doing that and shining light on people and lifting them up, creating buoyancy in what seems a disastrous situation which it is, but knowing we will get through it, because that's, we've faced this many times before. There's been pandemics before, well, epidemics, but there's certainly the pandemic with the Spanish flu and all that. So the human race will go on. It's just a matter of how we face that, how we confront the challenge right now.
And you're absolutely right. Isn't it amazing how quickly we've adapted? I mean, a new world order, without going into that very loaded term, but quite literally a new world order is in place right now. I don't mean to attach that to any body of thought. I'm using that quite literally. It is happening right now, and the humans have simply gone, okay, I'll make these drastic changes to my life. All these changes will be made for me, and I'm just going to have to find my feet amidst it.
Yeah.
And so we are. It's incredible.
Yeah. So here we are.
Here we are, yes.
So I think I'd just like to sort of wind up for us and get your thoughts, but and remind people that of the Serenity Prayer. Do you remember the Serenity Prayer?
Do you know, as I was coming to our call today, Sheryl, and we were talking about surrender, that was what was running through my head. I went, that's what this time is about. So yes, would you please say it for us?
Yes, the Serenity Prayer is: God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think we all need to keep that in our hearts and in our minds, and carry on.
Onward we go. What a beautiful conversation. And thank you to all those who have listened and to make it through to the end here, if you have. It's lovely when Sheryl and I get together, because we just have a good exploration banter like this. So hopefully it's been useful to the people listening. And we're in this together. We're all in this together, and where we emerge from this, we are yet to see, and everyone has a place within it. Everybody. Yeah.
This is an ongoing conversation, so I want to encourage people to start dialoguing with others in their own community. Set up your own online coffee chats, connect with people, stay strong, keep your community alive and healthy, and let them know that there's a place, a point in the community where they can reach out, and it's a touchstone for them through trying times.
Yes to that.
I'll give you a high five over there.
Woo! And what are we into now? The elbows,
yes.
The high elbows? Yes.
Anyway, thanks Nicole, and we hopefully we'll have some more conversations about this.
I think why not? Why don't we? We'll see where this rolls to, and I look forward to that.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Nicole, and bye everyone.